Welcome to my podcast, Senior to Seniors, where I dive into the stories of seniors, explore their unique experiences, discuss the real issues facing seniors today, and introduce you to those assisting seniors in their senior journey. I have the privilege to talk with some of the most interesting people in the world impacting the senior community. Today, I have one of those people with me. James I. Bond is joining me today, and he is the author of a book that you'll partially be able to see because of my background stuff, but it's called Brain Glue. And so, James is going to talk to you a little bit about what his thoughts for our podcast are today. I'm going to ask him a number of questions. By the way, I try to always, when I'm talking to someone, an author like James, always try to get their book, read their book, so I'm as prepared as I can for the podcast. And this book is so full of things. I'm 70, so my memory isn't what it used to be. I wish I could memorize everything in this book, and I wish I could have taught this to real estate professionals that I've been working with for the last 33 years. But I'm hoping that James will help us as seniors to apply his book and some of his theories and his thoughts on how it might actually help a senior to live a more fulfilling and a better life. One of the things I saw in the book is he said, I got glue stuck in my brain and I called it a book. And so we got to get some of that glue out of there, James, and we're going to talk about your book. And I think it's going to be very interesting. First, let me read to you a little bit about James. James I. Bond is one of America's leading behavioral management specialists, having worked with a who's who of American business. He is the author of the award-winning book, Brain Glue: How Selling Becomes Much Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. Brain Glue is considered by many to be one of the most powerful persuasion books ever written. For 13 years, James ran one of Southern California's leading behavioral management firms, working with a who's who of American business. Early in his career, he ran an advertising agency in Montreal, Canada. He is a workshop leader and past workshop chairman for the resource partner of the U.S. Small Business Administration and has been a popular featured guest at two Southern California universities. So, James, welcome. And I wanted to open this by saying, let's get sticky, baby. And
Thank you so much, Jim, for having me, and
uh,
thank you for checking the book out. I thought, really enjoyed it. I'm 73, and
okay.
so I heard this phrase, and I love this phrase. It says, "A life played backwards makes more sense," and I
Yeah.
think it's fascinating. We don't know what's going to happen as we go forward in our life, but as we get older, we go, "Oh, that makes sense. I see how this all, came to fruition and all that stuff."
If we
So.
could just do it in reverse, right? We would hope we would have all that stuff.
It would take the excitement away, though. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Well, when we opened this right before we went live on this, you gave me three thoughts that you had about what we might talk about today. Do you want to talk about those? And to my listeners, I thought it was better than I certainly prepared, and I think it was very well done. Could you do that for us as we get started?
Sure. And I was thinking of my own relationships with different people too. And
Hmm.
so to me, it relates three ways, the brain glue that we could talk about. The first one is as we get older, we do different things. And so I know some people who are doing public speaking, they wanted to do some public speaking, and that's what they're doing. I have a couple of friends who are authors, and so they actually use brain glue to help them come up with a title. Actually, three people, because one of them is actually, she has a friend and she's worked it out. So she's actually writing a script for a movie.
Hmm.
And so she, loves this because it's given her ideas that relate to like how do we come up with a title that makes people go, whoa. And
Uh-huh.
I'll give you some examples of that in a second. And
Okay.
then the third thing is we have family. I mean, if you have kids, I have a son and three daughters. We have a son and three daughters. I didn't give birth to them. Let's start there. But yeah, and our middle daughter is an entrepreneur and she's involved in real estate and construction. And so I started helping her with coming up with names for the different services she has. She lives in Montana and is married to a construction guy. And so one of the things she discovered is there are certain plots of land, like farmland, that don't have zoning
Yeah.
or have minimal zoning. And so she's worked it out that she can contact manufacturing companies and say, hey, I can help you find and build a property. It's near a major highway, but there's no zoning. And
Sure.
so we called it nozoning.com,
Hmm.
and they remember it. They go, oh, no zoning? He said, yeah, there's a little bit, but it's basically nozoning.com. But just when people, one of the things about brain glue talks about alliteration, the repetition of sound. And I love the story of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and they decide they want to start a TV show together. And so, so they want alliteration is repetition of sound. It works this way. Her name is Lucy, and they want to have Lucy in the show. So, what are other words that begin with the letter L? Like lucky, lucky Lucy. We could call it that. Okay, what else? Like Lucy, love Lucy. I love Lucy. There we go. And so
Hmm.
it's alliteration, and our brain loves things that are alliteration. Coca-Cola, Best Buy, PayPal, TikTok. I told my youngest daughter, TikTok. You think if it was called the Chinese social media platform, it would be as successful as TikTok?
Sure. Yeah.
She's funny because she said they're not Chinese. And she checked it out and came back and said, "Hey, Dad, you're right. They
Oh
are."
my gosh. Yeah.
You know. But so, and I one of the things I'm fascinated by is so Lucy and Desi created Desi Lou Production
Production.
to produce things,
Yeah.
and they produce all these TV shows that are blockbusters, like Star Trek, which uses alliteration, just like I Love Lucy. Star Trek. Why would they
Hmm.
call it Star Trek? It's a perfect name.
Yeah.
Mission Impossible, Mission Impossible. And so one of the things that I've discovered, that's what got me to write this. It actually took a long time to develop it because I started to understand how this works, and then I realized, wow, I can actually apply this. This is fascinating. But it helped me understand that brain glue. There are things in our brain that if you can trigger it, you get better response. I always remember O.J. Simpson. We're old enough to remember O.J. Simpson going to trial. If the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And there were two jurors at the end of the trial who were being interviewed by a journalist. And he said, with all that evidence against OJ, how come you found him not guilty? And one of them responded as the other one nodded her head in agreement. And she said, we knew if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. The glove didn't fit. We had to acquit.
The greatest line ever
Oh,
in
it's
defending.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But it's memory. So here's one. Jack and Jill went up the
Hill.
hill. How many of us know that? When was the last time we heard that?
Yeah.
For me, it might have been 20, 50, 60 years ago. Well, I'm 72, 73. So, but and I could be on my deathbed and somebody could say, hey, James, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. I mean, rhyme sticks where it's one of those things that sticks to the brain, just like alliteration, repetition of sound. And when we start to understand it and apply it, then suddenly it's fun, but it becomes really. I'm getting my hair cut, and this guy who's a barber is telling me I want to start a franchise. What would be a good franchise? What would be a good title for a franchise? And I'm like, okay, I'm getting my haircut, and I'm going haircut heroes. How about haircut heroes? And everybody in the haircut place is going, yeah, that's a great idea, haircut heroes. You
Hmm.
know, and it's just alliteration and repetition of sound.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's fun. I mean, I'm amazed, and I'm so lucky that I've done this. I think in our old age, we get feedback from people that we often wouldn't get otherwise. I got people, well, more than 17 people that have become millionaires who have applied this. And I'm like, wow, you became a millionaire? Oh, yeah, yeah. Let me tell you what I did. And it became, very, very exciting. And so, yeah, yeah, it's
Great.
just,
Well, one of the things I read in your book, page 11, was the easier you make it for people to understand what you are truly offering, the easier it will be to get them to buy. And I think that even includes us. you know, what we're doing and what we're selling. And when we talk about seniors, as you mentioned, if somebody wants to offer something to an organization, to be part of an organization, and being able to show what you bring to the table by having the right words, the right persuasive words, the sticky words, as you say it, and how they can, what you're truly offering will help them buy or use what you have. And I think I love, when you mentioned about there's some seniors that have maybe thought about writing a book, but they don't think that they can. But we all can, right? We all can. And we all have something to say. We all have a message. But I think for them, something like this, and okay, what could I put into a book? What could I name the book to make it sticky so people will pick it up and people will use it? So tell me, how does brain glue differ from traditional um, emotional selling techniques that we're all used to?
Well, we have brain triggers. That's one of the things, I discovered that I discovered this early on. I'm originally from Montreal, and I worked my way up and had as an advertiser with an advertising agency, and I won major clients like Kraft Foods, Timex, watches, Avon Cosmetics, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so they told me I have an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign, which I talk about in the book, so you know this. But they I came up with logical reasons why you should not do drugs, and I lost. And what did I lose to? A guy holding an egg saying, "This is your brain," cracking a shell and dropping the egg exactly into a sizzling frying pan. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? And when I saw it, I recognized this is profound. This is infinitely more powerful than what I came up with. But more importantly, this is emotional selling, not logical. And I have no clue how to do emotional selling. I mean, I don't teach it in school and libraries and stuff like that. They don't teach it. And so I put a box next to my computer and I called it the passion box. And I said, you know, I want to learn this. And part of me was scared, I don't know how to do emotional selling. But part of me, the scientist in me, and I think all of us or most of us are like this. We go, I wonder what it is. I wonder if I could figure out how to do this. And so I put a box next to my computer. I call it the passion box. And every time I heard something that was emotional selling, and it didn't have to be advertising, it could be just a quote from someone famous. And I'll give you some quotes and I'll show you how this works.
Okay.
Or if I had a magazine, an article in a magazine that I saw. My wife hated going to doctor's offices with me because I'd go through, you get a magazine like Vogue magazine. Us guys don't subscribe to Vogue magazine. And I'd be looking through and I go, oh, and she'd go, do not tear it out of the magazine. I go, no, look at this ad, how fantastic it was. And she would sit as far away from me as possible. I do not know that guy. But so after about 10 years, we had moved to Southern California and I met John Gray. And John Gray is an author who wrote a book called Men, Women, and Relationships. And he was telling me, I was so frustrated, he said, because I wrote the book. I worked hard to write this thing. People told me this is the most important, most powerful relationship book I've ever read. And yet almost nobody was buying the book. And so he was sitting in a seminar where he was trying to promote the book and talking to people. And he said something, and then he says, it's almost like men are act sometimes so differently that it's almost like we're from a different planet. And one woman starts laughing and says, "What planet are men from?" And he goes, "I guess men are from Mars," And
Yeah.
everyone started laughing. So when he got home, he's thinking, okay, men are from Mars. Where would women be from? I guess women are from Venus. Venus is the god of love. Huh. They laughed and responded more emotionally to my book than people who buy my book. What if I change the title to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? And then put some references to it throughout the book, but keep the same book. He was telling me, I know this guy, Steve Harrison, who helped him from marketing. So in my book, I said, he sold 10 million books. And Steve says, no, I'm working with him on marketing. We sold over 50 million books. He went from 20,000 to 50 million books, all because he changed the title.
Yeah.
And he used a metaphor, because men are not, we're not, all you ladies out there, we're not really from a different planet. I know we act like it sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's a metaphor is one of 14 brain triggers that I discovered. But I realized, what is it about a metaphor that makes it easier to get people to relate to it? And a metaphor, it works with, I mean, I have Jack Canfield who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul. He actually applied it. This is one of the things that I've discovered. I didn't invent brain glue. I've invented the term brain glue, but brain glue has been applied to people all along. So
Mhm.
Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, was telling me he wrote this book with a friend, and they have 101 stories that will that'll hopefully motivate you and change your life. And they thought, why don't we call it 101 motivational stories that will help change your life, okay, or improve your life?
Yeah.
But it bothered him. He said, no, it's just a logical. Emotionally, there's so much emotion in these stories that I have. I wish I had a more emotional title. And he said after about 30 days, he woke up in the morning and he went, well, chicken soup makes you feel good if you feel sick.
And
My book,
everybody knows that, right? What's the
he
first thing?
called it chicken soup for the spirit. And he went, okay, it doesn't really totally work, but it's kind of close. And he said after about a weekend of sleepless nights, he thought uh, SOUP, soup, SOUL, soul. It's alliteration, like the repetition of sounds.
Right.
Chicken soup for the soul sounds better. And that's the book, that title he came up with. But then he said, and I wrote 60 other bestsellers, and none of them used brain glue tools. That's the only one that used brain glue. I wish I had this early on so I knew what I was doing. Because
Yeah.
we understand, we want to be affected emotionally. There are two major scientists. There's one from Harvard University, Gerald Saltman, and Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman. And both of them discovered in totally different research work that they did and Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, by the way, he's a psychologist, for understanding that more than 90% of buying decisions are emotionally triggered. I mean, we say in marketing, you want someone to know, like, and trust you. It's emotion. So we're trained to sell logically. Let me tell you why this is good. It does this, does this. It's logical. But people buy for emotional reasons. I'm showing you how beautiful a car is. And then you're going, I love that color. Oh, wow, look at that. Or I love the shape of it or something like that. We, don't always realize what it is, but they discovered that more than 90% of buying decisions are emotionally triggered. In fact,
Mhm.
that's why logic, sometimes we throw logic at people. We think they understand, but they don't. Uh, so how's this? Okay. We hear this all the time. $1 billion. I love saying it to people. How much is $1 billion? Well, it's a lot. How much is it? Do you realize it's 1,000 times $1 million? Whoa. How much is $1 trillion? Because they're, government spending $1 trillion. That's 1,000,000 times $1 million. We could take 1 million Americans, families, and give them $1 million. Would that be good? Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people go like, really? I have this story in the book that I talk about it, that Americans uh, throw away 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour. Okay, it sounds like a lot, but how much is it? What if I told you that's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks?
Mhm.
Oh, suddenly I have a frame of reference. So we talk to people and don't understand that we're telling them something we think is important or valuable, and they don't always get it.
Sure.
That's why I love that, because I talk about it with marketing, but you do it with speakers, speech writers, and so um, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, is
Mhm.
President John F. Kennedy. It's
Mhm.
something called chiasmus, which is a flip.
Right.
Okay. All for one and one for all. And
Hmm.
when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I love the song. My wife hated the song. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. She hated that line. Okay.
But she didn't forget that title.
No,
That, yeah.
absolutely not. In
Yeah.
fact, I would say it. She go, oh no, not that.
Yeah.
But Malcolm X said we didn't land. He was a civil rights activist, a black
Sure.
civil rights activist who was, fabulous later in his life. And he said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock landed on us.
Hmm.
He also said, when you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. And so there's so many people who are trying to say something. You're trying to communicate to someone, and they nod their head and you think they understand. Yet they may be listening, but you think they understand or feel they understand, but they don't. And then when you can explain it in a slightly different way or with a metaphor or with something else, then people go, "Oh, that's interesting." So we had I for 13 years I ran one of California's leading behavioral management firms, actually one of America's leading behavioral management firms. I work with famous people like Warren Buffett's team brought me in to help him on his way to becoming the world's richest man. He didn't join me though. I mean, hey, how come anyway? A lot of story, and many others.
Hmm.
And so we would describe, we had psychologists, we had 22 psychologists working with us, as well as senior execs who are consultants and things like that from major companies. And we would describe what it is that we do, that we help them with behavioral management and with one of the tools that we have. And people would go, okay, and I can look at their face and they just like get glazed over, like they have no idea what we're talking about. Because we're telling them, technically we do this, and we do this, we do this.
Yeah.
And so I came up with a metaphor, and I said, or analogy. I said, it's just like someone who help, a coach who helps you do push-ups in the morning. A coach who helps you do push-ups can get you to do more push-ups than you could do on your own, right?
Hmm.
Come on, Jim, 4 more, 3 more. Come on, you can do it. I know you're talking. One more.
Yeah.
So helping somebody get more push-ups. A coach can help you do more push-ups than you can do on your own. Well, we help you to tackle you and your key people. We help you tackle bigger projects than you can do on your own. Because I gave them that analogy, they went, oh, interesting. And now it made more sense. And if we talked about psychologically, we do this and trigger this and use this part of the brain and blah, 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 and all that stuff. They listen and they like that, but they don't understand really what we're doing.
Yeah.
But people can relate to the fact that if you have somebody that are helping you do more push-ups, they can get you to do more push-ups than you could do on your own.
No,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. And, when you were talking about, I'm thinking in my business and in a real estate business as I've gotten older and as I've focused on working with older people, I found it's more important on how I make them feel than it is by the things that I offer, right? I can do all these things as opposed to this real estate agent. But I think what really makes a difference, if I'm able to do so, is, to make them feel that they're cared for, someone cares about them, and it's more than just the deal. The word, I hate the word deal. It's more than the deal. And you alluded to a car salesman. I think, most car salesmen will say, can you see yourself in a car? And can you imagine how that's going to make you feel when you're
right.
driving in that, right?
Yeah.
And so it's connecting all of that. So, um,
Well,
Jim,
just a quick one
yeah,
on
go
this.
ahead.
So
Go ahead.
Brad Sean, I was looking at this list of the considered the top 10 um, coaches that do push-ups and sit-ups and things that help you do, get your body straight. And so what would you call a website of Joe Johnson, joejohnson.com or Joe Johnson, health.com or something like that?
Uh-huh.
Well, Brad Schoenfeld, who's considered the top fitness coach in America, his website is lookgreatnaked.com.
There you go. And have not every one of us thought about that? You know?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Powerful. That's just powerful. Let me ask you this: for seniors looking to promote initiatives or programs to their local communities, what specific brain glue techniques would you recommend for them to enhance their outreach efforts? What would you say to that? What can a senior do to empower themselves?
Well, the first thing you want to do is come up with a metaphor. There are three:
Okay.
metaphor, rhyme. There are more. I have 14 in my book, but
14, yeah.
the three main ones are metaphor, rhyme, and alliteration, the repetition of sound. Okay, these are three to start with. Okay, and everybody can do that.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example of metaphors. Well, we have tons of metaphors, but complete the phrase. It's just like and be as crazy as possible. Have fun with it. Okay, my book is so good. Uh, it helps your product grab attention, just like a naked man running through your backyard.
Hmm.
What?
Hmm.
Does a naked man running through your backyard grab your attention? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
tell
my
me
book
more.
will
Tell
help.
me more.
Okay, exactly. So you want to come up with a metaphor. There's Paul Tran started a company and he was making an electric razor for man's private areas. I don't want to get too much into this, but
Uh-huh.
okay.
Right.
So he wanted to come up with a name that would explain what it is without offending people. And so he's thinking it's just like what? It's just like a lawnmower. Oh, why don't I call it the lawnmower? And he changed the name of his company to Manscaped. We landscape a man with the lawnmower. So if
Hmm.
I called a friend and I said, "Hey, guess what I just bought? What? The lawnmower." He'd go, "What? You have to mow your lawn?" I said, "No, no, it's a shaver electric razor for men's private areas." He started laughing and called his wife, "Hey, Mary, guess what James just bought? What? The lawnmower. Why? He has to mow his lawn? No, it's for shaving his private areas." Oh, what? Okay. I was in a store, Bed Bath and Beyond. My wife was buying something, and there's this poster, and there are like three guys who are standing in front of the poster, reading it, laughing, and then one of them actually was buying one of the products, and it said it's a white poster, and it says the lawnmower in huge letters, and then it has an arrow, and it points to the electric razor, and at the bottom of it, it explains what it is. So I'm like, the lawnmower, that's a lawnmower? What? And I came up to
Hmm.
it as these other people came up to it and were reading it. And then we all started laughing together as one guy picked it up and said, I got to buy this.
Sure.
Okay. But it grabs your attention. I think, I saw this guy who had a t-shirt that said life sucks and then you die. And I'm like, no, this is life right now. And we can define our life and have fun with it. And so, that's what a lot of this is about. Have fun with it. The more fun if you make people laugh, it helps them it triggers oxytocin. It goes into our bloodstream and it
Hmm.
actually helps us. We actually live longer. There's a famous uh, the editor of a major New York magazine, Cousins, something Cousins. I forget what his first name is. And he was told that he has 3 months to live. They discovered he has cancer, whatever else. Norman Cousins. And so he figured, I'm going to die. And I heard that laughing triggers oxytocin that helps the body fight off illness. I'm going to make myself laugh every single day. And he started watching humorous movies and cartoons and things like that. He started reading comic books. He started reading joke books. He started telling jokes to other people. And he lived for over 20 years after that. He was supposed to die in 3 months. He's actually
Hmm.
quite famous. He was quite famous. They couldn't believe it. Like, the doctor said most of the signs of cancer that you have, for some reason, they seem to be diminishing. We don't understand why. And he starts laughing, of course. I was talking to these three women. I was talking about something from a marketing standpoint. They were quite religious women. So, and they were a little resistant of me. I don't know why, but they were resistant of it, just period. And so I started with a joke and I said, "Hey, did you hear about the little girl who came up to her mommy and said, 'Mommy, Daddy says we came from apes, but you say we came from Adam and Eve. Honey, Daddy's talking about his family. I'm talking about my family.'" And they started laughing, just like you're laughing, but
Yeah.
they started laughing like crazy. And then I started introducing what I was saying, and they were much more receptive to it,
Yeah.
It just kind of opened the mind and it opened our heart, basically, so that people are much more comfortable interacting with us.
Yeah. Great. So you talk about storytelling, and how does storytelling become an effective way for seniors to persuade other seniors? Um, how does that work? Can you maybe expound upon that, Jim?
Yeah, we relate more to stories than we do to facts. That's why storytelling on a consistent basis, I forget what his name is, but there's a major marketer who talks about storytelling and marketing, you know, he's teaching people, lots of people that you don't just, it's like if you're selling a product or you're selling an idea, don't just say do this and do this, but say, let me tell you a story about somebody who did it. So let me give you a story, okay? So there's a mom and son. When I talk about brain glue, there's actually two stories on this one, okay?
Yeah.
So um, when I talk about brain glue, I talk about a mom and son with no business experience who watched Shark Tank and they went, "Oh, wow, wouldn't it be fun if we can invent a product that will get us on Shark Tank?" Okay. So we have to come up with a product. It took a while, about a month for them to come up with a product. And because you want a good product, you can't have a crappy product.
Yeah.
And so mom is constipated, and the doctor told her when you're on the toilet, if you can raise your feet 6 to 8 inches off the floor while you're sitting on the toilet, it actually changes the shape of your body and makes going to the bathroom easier. She tried it and it worked fabulously. So they came up with the idea and said, why don't we create a little stool that wraps around the toilet, and when you're on it, you can slide it out and put your feet on it. Oh, that would be a great idea. So they, went to the internet and they found a manufacturer who was nearby who would manufacture it for them, and they would make sell it for like $4 or $5, and they could to them, and they could sell it for $20 or something, 1995, and actually make really good money. But they needed a name for the product, and so it was a toilet stool. But she's going, toilet stool, that's not a nice name, toilet
Yeah,
stool.
yeah.
So what's another name for toilet? Well, potty, like the porta potty. Okay, potty. And you're kind of squatting, squatty potty. They generated $100 million in less than 2 years. This is a mom and son with no business experience. Okay. So about 4 months ago, I had heart bypass surgery. Not fun. Let me start there.
I
Okay.
bet. Yeah.
I had triple bypass surgery. But while I'm in bed, laying down, the nurse said to me, "Oh, so what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I wrote this book, Brain Glue," and I told her a story about Squatty Potty. She starts laughing and says, "I've got to tell you this, okay?" I said, "What?" She said, "Well, I'm a nurse, so I know you want to raise your feet when you're on the toilet, so I have a little stool at home. But I was in a store and I saw Squatty Potty and I laughed hysterically and I had to buy the product." I
Oh,
said, "You already had a stool, but you had to buy it?" "Yeah, I love the name so much, I had to buy the product."
wow.
Really? It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
Uh,
But,
a favorite author of mine, whose name Mark Stephen Porro, I believe, wrote a book called Letters from the Commode. And so when I saw the title, I wondered what it was about, but it was interesting enough that I looked into it. And it was actually letters that and things that he transcribed when his 89-year-old mother, who he was caring for in her old age, was going to the bathroom, and which she was often doing. He would have to lift her onto the commode, and while she was on the commode, he would transcribe things that they talked about, and he put it into a book called Letters from the Commode. So another interesting things, why would I, you see that book in a bookstore, why would I pick that book up? And what the heck is it going to be about?
right.
And it was quite different than what we thought. Before we go any further, I want to make sure people know how to get to your website. And I don't want them to go to the website right now. And you don't have to right now because I will connect this and they will see on both the YouTube video that I will load and on the podcast. But your website is yesbrainglue.com. Yesbrainglue.com. What will they get if they go there? What will they find, James?
Lots of information and some videos from me, from Jack Canfield and others, but a lot of information on how brain glue works. Just by the way, your friend, I would have called the book "How the Toilet Connected Me to My Mom."
There you go.
How's that for a title? It's like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah. That's as intriguing as the other. Tell me, how did you meet Jack Canfield? How did that work? And I'm sure people know, Soup for the Soul books and so forth. I don't know. He's got so many. I think there's Soup for the Teenage Soul and Soup for the all
Yep,
kinds of souls. I've got a bunch of them on my bookshelf
yep,
that I found. And by the way, if people don't have those books, grab them. They're beautifully
fabulous.
written and
Yep.
emotionally connecting in many ways. How did you meet James Canfield, if I may ask?
So Jack, so
I'm Jack. I'm sorry.
it's okay. But so I have a friend who knew him, who knows him, and Steve Harrison. And so Jack does review books. He looks at books, okay?
Yeah.
And so my friend loves it, loved the book so much. He saw it was so valuable, and he put it on the top of all the different books that Jack had to go through. And I got to interview Jack, and he got pissed off at me. And I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
There are two reasons. So the first one is he's talking to me, and he said, "I am so pissed off at you." And I said, "I'm so sorry. What did I do?" And he said, "Well, I I have all these books to read. I picked up your book and I couldn't put the damn thing down. So the first thing I said was, I'm so sorry. Can I get that as a quote? You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, put it in, yeah,
But
exactly.
here's the thing, okay? So my book had three titles, three different titles. So the
Hmm.
first one was I was reading about um, um, Carrie Smith, who started a company called HVLS Fans, okay, high volume, low speed fans. He changed the title to Big Ass Fans, and suddenly his sales skyrocketed. He ended up selling the company for $500 million. So Big Ass Fans, oh, okay, it's swear words, I don't know, but maybe I could do that. So I decided, why don't I call the book Dump Your Half-Ass Marketing Strategy? That was the original title, okay?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm running ads on Amazon. My book's on Amazon, and Amazon finally stops my advertising. And they contacted me and they said, we don't want swear words, and you're calling it dump your big ass, dump your half ass marketing strategy. And so we're being tougher right now, and we're not going to allow you to advertise on Amazon.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh no. And I said, well, if I change the title, would you? Because I had over 80 reviews. You want like lots of reviews on Amazon for people to read the book.
Sure.
I have over 80 positive reviews. And I said, if I change the title, would you let me keep the reviews? And they said, well, we normally don't, but we'll let you do it. Okay. And that's it. Okay. So I changed the title like an idiot to a logical title, not an emotional title. And I call it Sell More with the Right Brain Marketing Strategy. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
logical, not emotional.
yeah.
So Jack Canfield saw the book when it was called Sell More with the Right Brain Marketing Strategy. And he said, I'll give you all the quotes you want. I love this book. I bought copies and I've given it to everybody who works with me. I want them to read it and apply this. We need to apply this to everything we do and everything else. I'll give you quotes on one condition. You have to change the title. And I'm like, what? And he said,
Well, he's the kind of guy that can demand that kind of thing, right? You're going to listen.
absolutely. He
Yeah, you're going
said,
to listen.
your whole book is about brain glue, and why does it, and you're teaching us emotional selling, and yet you have a logical title. How dare you?
Yeah,
You need an emotional title. You need to call it brain glue. I said, do I have to? He said, yes, absolutely. I'll give you all the references you want. I love your book. I'm using it. We're training our people and all that stuff. So that's how it became brain glue.
what
But
a,
he was right.
yeah,
And a
yeah.
lot of people said, I have two problems. One problem is my name. It's James. That's why I say James Ibon, my middle name. And it's
Uh,
because people look up James Bond, you get like a lot, all the famous movies,
sure. Yeah,
but not me.
yeah.
And then they couldn't remember the title of the book. Now they remember it. It's Brain Glue. It's easy to
Right.
find.
Yeah, exactly. Question. So this is about influencing family dynamics,
Yes.
maybe with words. And I know many seniors find themselves in positions where they need to persuade adult children, or grandchildren for that matter, regarding decisions about their health or finances or even lifestyle.
Uh-huh.
What approaches do you recommend to navigate these kind of discussions effectively?
Um, so I'm going to give you, there are two tools. And the first one is you want to come up with um, a metaphor to describe it's just like da 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 da. Okay, if you can.
Hmm.
Rhyme term, I say brain glue lights the fire of desire in your buyer. That's what the book does. Lights. So I came up with desire. Okay, make
Hmm.
some desire. Well, okay, what are some words that rhyme with that? So you can do that. You can use Chat GPT, will help you often some of the
Sure.
things like that,
Yeah.
and alliteration. But I'll give you another tool, and this is a tool that changed my life, absolutely changed my life, and it's simple reflexive questions. Okay. Isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree are simple reflexive questions that you add to the end of your sentence, aren't they? What's the most powerful tool of human interaction? I'm using it now, aren't I? Can you tell what I'm doing? I'm using questions.
Hmm.
Questions are when you hear, so let me give you an example, two examples of how this worked in my life. Okay. So I have a friend who came over. It was a nice day. So I normally I would say, I was going to say, it's a beautiful day. Let's go out and throw a football around. Okay. But I said instead, it's a beautiful day, isn't it? And then I'm ready to go on. And he goes, yeah.
Mm.
Does yeah mean yes? Or does yeah mean there's something going on? So I said, it's a beautiful day, Jack, isn't it? And he goes, yeah. I said, why? What's wrong? Nothing. What? Not a big thing. Let's go. I said, no, no, no. What's wrong? And he finally explained to me he was having trouble with his wife and he was afraid they were going to have a divorce. And we got a nice talk and everything else. And eventually they resolved it. But I got to talk to him about that. And it's because it's wired into how we talk. I'll give you an example with when I learned how to do this, it affected me and my middle daughter. Okay. My middle daughter, Lauren, when she was 18 years old, I was talking to her as I was practicing having a lot of these in what I say. So instead of just making a statement, I said, "So you're awesome." So I said, "You're awesome, aren't you?" Because I asked the question, she went, "Yeah, but I don't think you really know that much." And I said, "What?" And I wrote a book. Because I started a behavioral management firm, so I wrote a book called The Secret Life of Fathers. And I started something called the Father-Daughter Project to build relationships. And a
Hmm.
lot of it had to do with my interaction with her. And
Hmm.
I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "Well, I was the quiet one in life, and you're a businessman and you're a problem solver. So because of that, you're always trying to solve problems." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, so whenever I start telling you something that's happened in my life, you stop me and then you start trying to solve my problem. When you're trying to solve my problem, it's almost like you're saying, you're stupid and daddy's smart, and daddy's going to show you how to solve the problem."
Yeah.
Two things she said. First, how come you don't shut up and just let me talk? Because I don't always want an answer from you. I just want to share with you what's going on. I said, "Oh." And she said, "And the second thing is, ask me if I could solve the problem instead of you're trying to solve the problem all the time."
Wow.
And it just had an impact, a profound impact on me because I started to understand, am I always like that? She said, "Yeah, your business was growing. And because of that, you're working with so many people. And I was the quiet one that you never really got to know me." She
Mm.
said, I love her dearly. I love all my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I realized, like, really, I didn't get to know you. She said, "No, I've had relationship problems and all these other issues and stuff. And I would try to start talking to you about it, and you're trying to fix it instead of just being quiet
Listening.
and, yeah, and listening." Exactly. And so when we take that tool of isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree? And an easy way to start this is pick a family member and
Yeah.
talk to them for 5 minutes, only asking questions. Okay.
Mhm.
I do it in my classes. I do stuff for a small business administration. I do training programs. And I say, okay, we're going to go for 5 minutes. Pick the person next to you and start talking to them. Keep talking to them, but only ask questions. And so after the first 2 or 3 minutes are easy, but after that, I think we go for 10 minutes. After that, it becomes really tough. I said, you
Yeah.
know, but it trains us to interact instead of just talk at. We don't talk at, we interact with. And one of the most powerful tools that we have of human interaction, maybe the most powerful one, unless our life is in danger, is questions. And
Yeah.
questions, so when you're talking to somebody, you're trying to sell a product. If you say this is a great product, that's totally different from saying this is a great product, isn't it? So I have a construction company. The first one that I actually applied when I started to learn how brain glue works, I applied this to a construction company. After 10 years, they had $2 million of sales. There are three partners. Not bad, $2 million of sales, right? Huh. In 1 year, I took them from 2 to 10 million, and they reached 32 million 2 years later by applying brain glue. So it's really good, and I can talk about that. But I remember the meeting I had with one of the partners, and I was talking to him about what we were doing and how it works and everything else, the behavioral management stuff that we do. And but I was implementing the questions, and I said, da, 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 "Does that make sense?" And he goes, "Yeah." Well, when he goes, "Yeah," that doesn't mean it makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah,
Hmm.
that sounds like it's not, doesn't really make sense, and we're interacting. So I said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "No, no, go on, continue telling me more." I said, "No, no, well, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, I love what you're doing. I think it could have tremendous impact on us, but I don't think we have the time to be able to to spend the time with you guys." And I don't know what made me think of it, but I had a great answer. I said, "It's only 2 hours a week. You could be on the bathroom on the toilet for 2 hours a week." He started laughing and went, "Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
fine." And then
Yeah.
we had them as clients.
Yeah.
But I would never have uncovered that if I would have gone da 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 da, okay, would you like to buy at the end and closing it?
Sure.
And so when
Sure.
we interact with people, it's the same thing. If we can wire into us simple reflexive questions, isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree? When we interact with them, we're interacting with them instead of just, we don't realize how much, and I work with a lot of public speakers who are like this, but family members too, where we realize we're used to talking at people. We don't realize it, but we're used to talking at people, not interacting with them.
Yeah.
We want to, but we're assuming we're interacting with them, but we don't realize that if we can add a question to a lot of the statements we make, it just changes everything and becomes much more it makes us much more interactive.
Well, and it makes having a conversation with somebody so much easier. I mean, one of the scariest things for a lot of people, including seniors. I'm in a Dell web community here in the Dallas area,
Uh-huh.
and when you come and move to a Dell web area, 55 and over, it's usually made up of people from all places. And so there's lots of social functions. And in talking to some seniors that are friends of mine, one of the things they say is the hardest is just talking to meeting people. And what do I say? And I say, even to the real estate agents I've worked with, just ask a question. You don't have to tell them about you and what you do and how long you've been in business, or ask them about them. If you're networking, ask questions. People love talking about themselves and they love the questions. And I think I'm adapting that in the same way that you were speaking of, James, the same kind of way. Um,
So funny you should say that. I got to tell you this. So this guy is telling me, I got a date with the girl of my dreams because of your book. I said, really? He said, yeah, I got to tell you what I did. Okay. So one of the things you talk about is don't be afraid to say something, negative about yourself. Not negative about yourself, but a disadvantage that you have. Okay. I mean, I'm a marketer. And so I say, when Steve Jobs came up with a phone that has a camera inside it, I went like, who needs a camera on a phone? You should see how
uh-huh.
many pictures I got on my phone. Okay.
Yeah.
So with the father-daughter project, I would talk about, I'm supposed to be this, great behavioral management specialist. Let me tell you a story of my daughter, and how I tell you that. Okay.
Hmm.
And I say it on purpose, but it opens the door. So he said, you're talking about that. And so I have to tell you, there's this girl, he goes to college. There's this girl that's sitting there, and I decided I wanted to have a date with her, but I don't know how to ask her for a date. So what I did was I said, "Could I ask you a question? Because I think you'd be able to know the answer." And she goes, "Sure." She says, he said, "If I wanted to have a date with a girl, a beautiful girl, what would I say to her? What's a good thing to say to her?" And she starts laughing and goes, "You're asking me?" He said, "Yeah, well, what do you think? I think that you probably know." And she said, "Oh, well, you do this and this and this." And then she even said, "Take her out on a date somewhere." And then he says, "And if you were going to take her on a date, where would be a good place to take her?" And she said, "Oh, there's this restaurant down here. It's really kind of a nice place to take girls." So I said, "Okay, great. Thank you so much." And I turned around and I did a 360. I turned right around and looked back at her. And then I gave her the question that she gave, and I offered the place. She
Yeah.
started laughing like crazy, but she said, "Okay, fine."
Yeah.
Let's
How can you say no to that? It was your own words, right?
exactly. And then I talk about in the book, I talk about the power of humor.
Hmm.
So he said, so when I was sitting on a date with her, I had a joke book and I was sharing jokes with her. She was laughing like crazy. And now we're going on a second date. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it works because it's human. I mean, persuasion, is about human interaction. And brain glue is about this whole concept that I've learned about human interaction. And I think that's one of the things I got to share in our old age. We get to share it. We want to pay it forward. I love one of my favorite movies was Pay It Forward.
Yeah.
The concept of you don't pay back to people, but if somebody helps you, then you want to help other people and do it that way. And so
Exactly.
that's one of the great privileges I had with brain glue is that a lot of people it helps them, and we're older, so we tend to. This is one of the things about the whole audience for your podcast is we're older, so we tend to know stuff more than we did when we were younger,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, one of the most important things, as this person that was with you was talking about, is interacting with somebody else. Like, how do you start a conversation, or what do you say? And one of the most powerful tools is a question.
Yeah.
And you can even start by saying, "Hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you, but I have no idea where to begin. Do you have any ideas?"
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's,
Huh?
it's it's easy if you just think about it, and before you actually are put into that situation, just think about the kind of things that you want to ask, things that you want to know about people. James, if uh, I've asked you a number of questions, what is the question that I haven't asked you that you want to answer? What question
Um,
haven't I asked?
to I think you've asked really wonderful questions, so thank you. But to me, the most important thing is having a positive life. You know, I go back to the guy who had a T-shirt that said "Life sucks and then you die." No, we're alive right now, and the more we can have positive interactions with people, positive impacts in our life, the better it can be. So if you want to make some more money, I'll help you do that because with brain glue and all that stuff. But if you want a better relationship with people, then it's all about you know help other people have that positive interaction. That's one of the things I focus on this on brain glue, but I focus on this throughout it, and that is having a positive interaction with people is one of the most important things that we have in our life. You don't want to have a crappy life. You know, you want to have positive experiences, you know, because life passes pretty fast. You know, I'm 73 now, you're over 70, and
Yeah.
I can't believe how I blink and suddenly it's my next birthday. What? You
Yeah.
know, my kids are like, my son is 40. I keep going, my son is like 20. No, no, he's over 40. Oh, really?
Have the same thing. It's like I wonder what birthday it's going to be in 40. It's impossible. It's impossible. But
Yeah.
well, listen, James, your book is more than just a book for salespeople and that type of thing. I think anybody who picks it up would enjoy it. And it's a great read. There's so much in here that I loved reading and I wanted to share it with my audience. And sometimes in my podcasts, I talk about, senior issues that deal with health and finances and those type of things. This is really fun and light, and I think people will enjoy this a lot. So I want to thank you for being part of this, and I hope we connect again sometime.
Thank you so much.
All right.
You were just awesome. And your podcast is awesome. If people are just listening to this one, they're missing how great your podcast is. So thank you. Thank you.
You're very kind. Well, let's connect again. I love doing this, and so I hope we talk again. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Have
You
a
too.
great day, huh?
You too.
Okay, bye bye.